everyone, and welcome to Bookish Babbles, the podcast where we reread our favorite books and chat about them. I'm your host, Alyson, and without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back to Bookish Babbles. Today we are talking about chapters 7 to 9 of The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. And we're wrapping up part 1. Woo! Exciting. And before we get started, just in case no one's heard, but Grover and Annabeth have been casted for the Percy Jackson series, guys. Grover and Annabeth, we have the trio. If you haven't seen the pictures on Rick's blog, please go see it. They are perfect. I love them already. Grover is being played by Arian Simadri, and Leah Jeffries is Annabeth Chase. And because I know Rick was so heavily involved in the casting process, and he knows these characters inside and out. These three, he has of all the characters in the Percy Jackson universe, those three he's known the longest. He knows them inside and out better than all of us. So if these kids have his stamp of approval, good enough for me. I'm so excited to see them. Cause last week, really an emotional roller coaster for me, because I finally finished Clone Wars, which, how did I not watch it sooner? #FakeFan. It was freaking amazing, and probably my favorite Star Wars show that I've seen now, though I still have yet to watch Rebels and Bad Batch. And last episode of Moon Knight came out. I need season 2 now, and I saw Multiverse of Madness. I won't give any spoilers away, obviously, but I wish I had a glass of wine while watching it at certain points. But it was really good. I really liked it. I don't know where I'd rank it among favorite Marvel movies, but probably up there, mostly because Wanda's in it and she's my favorite. But anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about the Hunger Games. So last week, Katniss and company, they arrive in the capital. She and Peeta make a fiery debut. That was so bad. Anyway, Katniss learns what an Avox is, and she sees someone that she failed to help is now an Avox. This week, the tributes begin their training. Katniss learns to walk in high heels. Very challenging task. And Peeta drops a bombshell on interview night. So with all that being said, let's dive into chapter 7. So this chapter opens with Katniss telling us about her nightmares. She sees Lavinia, aka the redheaded Avox girl. She sees images from previous games, her mother incapacitated with depression again, Prim terrified, and screaming for her father as the mine explodes. All in all, pretty intense dreams, I'd say. So Katniss wakes up at dawn, takes a shower. When she comes out, there's already an outfit laid out for her. This is, of course, her outfit for training, since this is the first day of training. Tight black pants, long sleeve tunic, and leather shoes. And Katniss braids her hair, and it's the first time she feels like she resembles herself since Reaping Day. No fancy clothes or makeup, and she looks like she could be getting ready to go hunting and meet Gale in the woods. Katniss then goes down to the dining room since she's hungry and wants breakfast. And she's not disappointed because there's already a whole buffet of dishes lined up for her to choose from. She piles up her plate with food, sits down, dips chunks of her bread into hot chocolate like Peeta did on the train, and I kind of want to try that now. Sounds good. Anyway, as she's eating, she thinks about her mother and Prim, wonders how they felt watching her in the tribute parade. Did they feel hopeful? Were they impressed with her outfit? Or are they despairing because they're, seeing her lined up with the other tributes? She also can't believe it's only been 2 days since she's seen them, because to her it feels like she's been gone for far longer. Soon, Peeta and Haymitch show up for breakfast. Katniss is annoyed that she and Peeta are dressed in identical outfits and notes to talk to Cinna later about this. Since she's convinced that them being, visually linked together will blow up in their faces once the games begin. then she remembers the deal with Haymitch. Besides, Sin has proven to be trustworthy when it comes to wardrobe, so another reason not to say anything. So like I said earlier, this is the first day of training for the tributes. There will be 3 days total, and in the afternoon on day 3, they each will have a private session with the game makers to show off a skill. Katniss is naturally nervous about meeting the others, which is understandable. After all, she's about to meet her potential near-future murderers, or, one of her near-future victims. Bit awkward. And after eating some food, Haymitch asked Katniss and Peeta if they'd like to be coached together or separately. Reason he asked is so, one of them has any secret skill they want to hide. They'd want to be coached separately to hide that. Anyway, Peeta says that he has no secret skill and he's sure he knows Katniss's since he's eaten enough of her squirrels. And this answer surprises Katniss because she's always assumed that Mr. Millark kept the squirrels to himself since most people from town like to eat the more expensive meats like beef and chicken because they can afford to. So in the end, they decide to be coached together. And this next conversation that happens is one of my favorites in the whole series because it basically evolves into Katniss and Peeta arguing, but also hyping each other up. I'm not sure why I find it so hilarious, but I do. So I'll read it out loud. I'll read it out loud for you guys. It starts on page 89. Alright, so give me some idea of what you can do, says Haymitch. I can't do anything, says Peeta, unless you count baking bread. Sorry, I don't. Katniss, I already know you're handy with a knife, says Haymitch. Not really, but I can hunt, I say, with a bow and arrow. And you're good? Asks Haymitch. I have to think about it. I've been putting food on the table for 4 years. That's no small task. I'm not as good as my father was, but he'd had more practice. I've better aim than Gale, but I've had more practice. He's a genius with traps and snares. I'm all right, I say. She's excellent, says Peeta. My father buys her squirrels. He always comments on how the arrows never pierce the body. She hits everyone in the eye. It's the same with rabbits she sells the butcher. She can even bring down a deer. This assessment of my skills from Peeta takes me totally by surprise. First, that he ever noticed. Second, that he's talking me up. What are you doing? I ask him suspiciously. What are you doing? If he's going to help you, he has to know what you're capable of. Don't underrate yourself, says Peeta. I don't know why, but this rubs me the wrong way. What about you? I've seen you in the market. You can lift a 100-pound bag of flour, I snap at him. Tell him that. That's not nothing. Yes, and I'm sure the arena will be full of bags of flour for me to chuck at people. It's not like being able to use a weapon. You know it isn't, he shoots back. He can wrestle, I tell Haymitch. He came in second in our school competition last year, only after his brother. What use is that? How many times have you seen someone wrestle someone to death, says Peeta in disgust. There's always hand-to-hand combat. All you need is to come up with a knife, and you'll at least stand a chance. If I get jumped, I'm dead. And then the conversation turns when Peeta kind of snaps and we learn something really sad about reaping day for him. Okay, so it starts on page 90 with Peeta snapping. But you won't! You'll be living up in some tree eating raw squirrels and picking off people with arrows. You know what my mother said to me when she came to say goodbye, as if to cheer me up? She says, maybe District 12 will finally have a winner. Then I realized she didn't mean me. She meant you, burst out Peeta. Oh, she meant you, I said with a wave of dismissal. She said she's a survivor, that one. She is, says Peeta. That pulls me up short. Did his mother really say that about me? Did she rate me over her son? I see the pain in Peeta's eyes and I know he isn't lying. So we already know that Peeta doesn't have the best relationship with his mother, given the fact that she physically assaulted him as a child for just burning bread. But now we really know how terrible the relationship is. Now, quick side note, I think that Mrs. Millark could be an interesting, three-dimensional character. I mean, she entered into a marriage knowing that she was second choice, or at least she figured it out at some point, because we know that Mr. Millark was in love with Katniss's mom. So Mrs. Millark has really good reason to feel bitter and resentful, and I don't think there's any way to get therapy in District 12. But that's still no excuse for creating an abusive environment for her kids and, still a shitty person for that. Like, Katniss and Prim obviously had a traumatic childhood, their dad dying, mom mentally abandoning them, and almost starving to death. Just slightly stressful experiences, but at least they have a loving, healthy relationship. Peeta's grown up in a consistent abusive environment, and I'm pretty sure doesn't have a very close relationship with his brothers. Unlike Prim, none of his siblings volunteered for him. And granted, the series is told from Katniss's point of view, but we never see Peeta interact with any of his brothers. And the result of this is Peeta doesn't have a very high opinion of himself, as we can clearly see from this conversation. Like, has no confidence that he could win or that he's worth being a victor. Also, another side note, Mr. Malark may technically be the better parent and, a kinder person when compared to Peeta's mom, but he's still not that great because he knows that his wife is abusing their kids and he just lets her. He doesn't confront her about it, stand up to her, and I think he lets her get away with stuff because he probably feels guilty because he knows she's unhappy in their marriage, again, because he's in love with another woman, and this is probably a big reason as to why Peeta has such a low self-esteem, because no one truly stood up for him or fought for him. So that has enforced this message to Peeta that he isn't worth saving. Okay, the more I think about this, the more sad I get. So I think it's safe to say that Peeta is one of the most beloved characters in this series, and it's so sad that the most loved character doesn't believe he's worthy of that love. Okay, I need to move on from this tangent before I pull a Haymitch and open a bottle of wine or something. Don't mind me, guys. Anyway, Katniss indirectly references the day Peeta gave her the bread, basically saying that she is only where she is today because someone helped her. Peeta says that, people will be lining up to sponsor Katniss. She argues people will also be looking to sponsor Peeta. Then Peeta rolls his eyes and says she has no idea the effect she can have. And right after he says that, on page 91, there's a paragraph where in Katniss's thoughts where she says, what on earth does he mean? People help me? When we were dying of starvation, no one helped me. No one except Peeta. Once I had something to barter with, things changed. I'm a tough trader. Or am I? What effect do I have? That I'm weak and needy? Is he suggesting that I got good deals because people pitied me? I tried to think if this is true. Perhaps some of the merchants were a little generous in their trades, but I always attributed that to their long-standing relationship with my father. Besides, my game is first class. No one pitied me. I glower at the roll, sure he meant to insult me. Okay, so I know I just got off of a kind of lengthy side tangent 10 seconds ago, but I'm about to go on another one now. So, that line Peeta says about Katniss not realizing the effect she has on people, I think is one of the most important lines in the whole series, and it also highlights one of the most interesting things about Katniss as a protagonist, that being Katniss just clueless to how she can impact people. Thus, she isn't always 100% a reliable narrator. Which gets proven later on multiple times by how she reads people and misinterprets their motives or actions. And just a few chapters ago, she's convinced that Peeta is a danger to her because he's plotting on how to kill her. But we all know she's dead wrong about that. So that line also foreshadows the future a bit, because we know that when Katniss does the whole trick with the berries, she doesn't understand the consequences or just how it'll impact the whole country. And tying this back to Ballad, because we all know I missed talking about that book already, Katniss throughout the whole series will be completely unaware of just how deeply she is affecting Snow personally, because we all know she reminds him of Lucy Gray. And it's just fun to imagine, old Coria watching everything Katniss does and getting more and more irritated. And everyone around him who, works for him just looking at each other what are we supposed to do now? Anyway, back to the conversation at breakfast. Haymitch tells Katniss that during her private sessions with the game makers, she should show them how good she is at archery so that they'll put a bow in the arena. And he also gives Peeta a slight pep talk by reminding him that physical power in the arena can be an asset. So the plan is for the two of them not to reveal to the other tributes what they're good at. So Peeta shouldn't lift heavy weights and Katniss should steer clear of archery. And in public, they have to stay by each other's sides at all times. They both start to object, Katniss probably more than Peeta, but Haymitch says it's not up for discussion, reminds them of the deal and to do what he says, and tells them to meet Effie at the elevator for training at 10. And Katniss does what most teenagers do when they're upset with their parents and goes back to her room to sulk. And she's really unhappy that she has to pretend to be friends with Peeta, which is fair considering where they're going. And she also thinks that Peeta clearly doesn't want to partner up with her, too. And again, makes me laugh considering what we learn later about Peeta and the kind of bond they form. Also, Katniss thinks back to what Peeta said about her not knowing the effect she has and begins to wonder if maybe he didn't mean it as a way to demean her. I can answer that question. No, he did not. He meant it as a compliment. She's also surprised to realize that Peeta has noticed things about her, but she's also noticed things about him because, I mean, she did remember that he came in second for the school wrestling competition. Anyway, she finishes pouting for now and goes to meet Effie and Peeta by the elevator, and now most of her anger has been replaced by nerves since she's about to meet the other tributes because, like I said, nothing like meeting your potential murderers and or murder victims. Alright, so the tributes all train in an enormous gymnasium. Katniss notes that she and Peeta are the only ones who are dressed alike, unlike the movies where all the tributes literally wear the exact same outfit. So during training, the tributes are free to travel between stations that are set up, and they each have experts to help them. The stations vary between survival skills, fighting techniques, and the tributes, of course, are forbidden to fight each other during training because, plenty of time to do that in the arena. If they want to have a sparring partner, that's what the trainers are for. And while the head instructor, Atala, I think that's how I say it, Atala, is going through the list of the stations, Katniss looks around at the other tributes. Most of them are bigger than her, and she starts feeling a little nervous, naturally. But then remembers that she's still strong and has experience hunting, so that makes her stand up a little straighter. And then we get the exposition about the career tributes. Basically, they're from Districts 1, 2, and 4. Though if you've only seen the movies, you'd think it was only 1 and 2 that are the careers. But no, in the books, it's 1, 2, and 4. So those tributes from those districts, they train for the Hunger Games. And, it's a big honor to be a tribute. And technically, training for the games is illegal, but the Capitol allows the career tributes to get away with that since, it helps make the games more entertaining to have, tributes who can actually fight and are more aggressive. And they're naturally Capitol favorites, and they win most years. Also, side note, I would love a story from the point of view of a career tribute, because, during the games, do they ever, second guess everything? Do they have an existential crisis? We kind of got a glimpse of that in the movies with Cato, but, is everyone in the career districts, deeply brainwashed? I don't know. It'd be an interesting book, because you're, in between the capital and the districts, so it's interesting to think about. And when Katniss describes, the career tributes on page 95, she says they project arrogance and brutality. So naturally, she's a bit intimidated, and some of the confidence she gains from the parade crumbles. As soon as the tributes are free to train, the careers pick up their weapons and start immediately showing off. Katniss and Peeta go to the knot-tying station. They learn to set some snares and make traps. They go to camouflage, and we learn that Peeta is a great artist and decorated all of the cakes at the bakery that Prim likes to look at. Katniss gets annoyed by how good Peeta is at camouflage and the praise that he gets from the instructor. Even cuts off Peeta before he finishes making some kind of joke about a giant cake being in the arena. Rude. I would like to hear the end of that joke, Katniss. So the next 3 days pass with Katniss and Peeta going from station to station, following Haymitch's instructions, trying to act like friends. And why do I low-key get the feeling that Katniss would rather fight a dragon than be forced to make friends? It doesn't make sense, but I relate to the feeling. Anyway, they also stay away from, weightlifting and archery, like Haymitch said, so the other tributes don't know what their strengths are. Though, throughout the days of training, the game makers are there chilling on their balcony, overlooking all the tributes, taking notes, and Katniss notices that they are watching her and Peeta. I mean, this is probably the first time in years that game makers have shown an interest in tributes from District 12 this early on. Probably not since Haymitch's time. Lunch is the only time that all the tributes ever eat in the same room. Most eat by themselves and look like lost sheeps, according to Katniss, and the careers naturally sit together. Katniss and Peeta have to eat together, and, they struggle to find things to talk about. At some point, Peeta talks about all the different kinds of bread and which district they came from. Like, for example, District 4's bread is a fish-shaped loaf tinted green with seaweed. I can't say that. Tinted green with seaweed, Alyson. The crescent moon roll dotted with seeds is from 11. And I kind of wish we got scenes like this for the movie, kind of to help lighten the mood, especially at the part where they're sitting and Peeta tells Katniss to laugh like he said something funny. I know Jen and Josh would have made these moments hilarious, but I understand why they were cut out. And on the second day of training, Peeta notices that they have a shadow while they're at the spear throwing station, and it's of course Rue, our favorite person from District 11, or at least mine. And this is of course hard for Katniss since Rue reminds her so much of Prim. I mean, heck, they're both named after flowers. And it sucks because, where they're going, Katniss knows she can't really do anything for Rue. And so during training, Katniss notices that Rue often shows up at the same stations she and Peeta are at. Rue is clever with plans. She's good at climbing and really good at hitting targets with a slingshot. And during breakfast and dinner in the District 12 floor, Katniss and Effie just not Katniss and Effie. Haymitch and Effie grill Katniss and Peeta about everything that happened during training. And they're actually getting along pretty well and can work together in order to get Katniss and Peeta ready for the games. Katniss is also holding Peeta at a distance when they're not in public. On the third day after lunch, the tributes start getting called in for their private sessions. Katniss is stuck going dead last since they go district by district and the boy goes first. When it is Katniss's turn, she immediately notices that there's a problem. The game makers have been there too long and are about ready to tap out. Kind of like how, when you start mentally tapping out during your last hour of work or school. Though in most cases, you're not doing a job where, there are lives on the line, I feel like. And also the game makers have been drinking wine, and most jobs in schools that I know of at least don't let you drink alcohol while on the clock. Though if you know any companies like that, let me know. Katniss picks up a bow and a quiver of arrows, and instead of staying at the archery station, she goes to the center of the gym and aims at the dummies used for knife throwing. And not being used to the feel of this bow, Katniss misses the dummy she'd been aiming at by a few inches and starts to lose the game maker's attention. She goes back to the archery range, hits the bullseye on the target so she can get a better feel of the weapon, then goes back to the center of the gym, hits the dummy through the heart, hits a sandbag hanging up, and even shoulder rolls forward before hitting one of the hanging lights in the ceiling, which just sounds really impressive. But when she looks up at the game makers, only a few were watching, but most are fixated on the roast pig that had just arrived at the banquet table. And Katniss is rightfully pissed off because her life is on the line and these assholes can't even do the bare minimum and pay attention to her during her own private session. So without thinking, Katniss shoots at the banquet table, hitting the apple in the pig's mouth and pinning it to the wall. And she ends the chapter in the best way possible. She says, "Thank you for your consideration," bows, and then leaves the room without being dismissed. What a queen. This is why we all love her. So, with all that being said, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about Chapter 8. Hey guys, it's Alyson from A Different Point in Time, and I am here with another random recommendation. So, this one's gotten pretty popular recently. It's a graphic novel, but I'm still going to recommend it because it's popular for a reason. It's really good, and just in case you need another sign to read this book, here's your sign. Go read it now. The Girl from the Sea by Molly Knox, Ostertag? I butchered that name. My bad. So I'll read the description. From the author of the Witch Boy trilogy comes a graphic novel about family, romance, and first love. 15-year-old Morgan has a secret. She can't wait to escape the perfect little island where she lives. She's desperate to finish high school and escape her sad divorced mom, her violent little brother, and worst of all, her great group of friends who don't understand Morgan at all. Because really, Morgan's biggest secret is that she has a lot of secrets, including the one about wanting to kiss another girl. Then one night, Morgan is saved from drowning by a mysterious girl named Kelty. The two become friends, and suddenly life on the island doesn't seem so stifling anymore. But Kelty has some secrets of her own, and as the girls start to fall in love, everything they're trying to hide will find its way to the surface, whether Morgan is ready or not. Yeah, it is the kind of book that you can read in one sitting. It's a wonderful coming-of-age story, has beautiful artwork, and I really highly recommend it. So, I gave it like 5 out of 5 stars. So, with that being said, let's back to the episode. Alright, we are back. So, after Katniss basically says fuck you to the game makers and left her session, she starts to feel the adrenaline leave her and the anxiety kicks in. So she does what teenagers do. She starts spiraling, feels like it's the end of the world, and starts imagining the worst case scenario. Then again, I don't blame her for being dramatic here because, like I've said before, her government is run by a bunch of sensitive snowflakes who get offended at the smallest things. So Katniss is convinced that she'll be arrested, executed, made into an AVOX, etc. She's scared this could negatively affect her family back home. Haymitch and Effie are knocking at her door while she's having this breakdown, and she tells them to go away. As the sun starts setting, Katniss begins to calm down, realizes that, they still need a girl tribute for District 12, so it's unlikely they would arrest her now, just, make life in the arena extra hard for her, and probably give her a score so low that no one would want to sponsor her. When it's time for dinner, Katniss emerges from her room. Since she realizes that she can't hide forever, though she's quiet and doesn't eat much. When Haymitch finally asks about how things went, Peeta's the first to answer, and just like how it was for Katniss, the game makers had barely looked at Peeta, and were even singing some kind of drinking song. And Peeta just basically threw around heavy objects until they told him to go. Then Haymitch turns to Katniss and asks how she did, and when he asked her, he calls her sweetheart, and that's enough to make Katniss annoyed enough to snap out of the state she's in and answer him. And her answer naturally shocks everyone. Funny enough, I think the part where Effie is most horrified is when Katniss told her that she left before being dismissed. Because, bad manners or something, can't break protocol. Haymitch isn't too worried about the whole thing, though, because, it'd be a pain to try to replace Katniss at this point, and he's sure that Katniss's family is safe. Reason for that being because, if they punished Katniss and or her family for what she did during the private session, they would have to reveal what she did, and the game makers aren't allowed to talk about what the tributes do during those sessions. So, other than making Katniss's life hell in the arena, she and her family should be in the clear. So now Katniss feels better. She has an appetite again. Haymitch also picks up a pork chop with his fingers just to annoy Effie. Even dips it in his wine. The more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that had Snow not fucked with Haymitch's life, he would have been a pretty good dad. Like, I'm completely basing this off of his interactions with Peeta and Katniss, and I love how he and Effie basically act like divorced parents. It's beautiful. Then Haymitch asks about the game maker's reaction. Katniss tells us that one of the guys fell into a punch bowl. Really sad we couldn't get that in the movie. And we know from Catching Fire that the person who fell in the punch bowl was Plutarch, and I understand he wasn't cast yet, so they couldn't have him, fall in the punch bowl, but they could have had a random game maker extra do it, and it would have been great. Even Effie is amused by this, even though she's trying to suppress a smile and not act amused. And she even says that, serves them right, since it's their job to pay attention to the tributes during their private sessions, no matter which district they're from, which is probably the most controversial thing Effie has ever said in her entire life. Anyway, Katniss is sure that she'll get a really low score. Portia assures her that no one really pays attention to scores unless they're really good, and for all anyone knows, she could be getting a bad score on purpose to hide her real talents. So they finish dinner, they go into the sitting room to watch the scores get announced. It's pretty straightforward. They show a picture of the tribute and reveal the score, which is, 1 to 12, 1 being really bad, 12 being like a perfect score. So the career tributes naturally get scores, in the 8 to 10 range. Most of the others average at 5. Rue gets a 7, which is really impressive given how young and how tiny she is. District 12 scores are naturally announced last. Peeta gets an 8, so more game makers were paying attention than he realized, and Katniss surprises everyone by scoring an 11. Woo! Everyone cheers. Cinna calls her the girl on fire and teases her about her interview dress. Katniss goes back to her room and falls asleep since the stress of the day has worn her out. When she wakes up in the morning, she lays in bed, thinks about home. Since it's Sunday, Katniss wonders if Gale is already in the woods hunting, since Sundays are the days they always go hunting, since everyone's off from school and work. And then we learn about the first time that the two of them met in the woods. It was on a Sunday in October when Katniss was 12 years old. She had spent the day gathering nuts and swamp potatoes, aka Katniss's. The only meat she had caught was a squirrel she shot when it ran by her. Then Katniss stumbled upon a dead rabbit caught in a snare. She goes to take a closer look since the ones she set up all summer haven't worked. Then 14-year-old Gale appears to remind her that stealing is punishable by death. Also, Katniss says that even at age 14, Gale was already 6 feet tall. And she also remembers seeing him at the Justice Building when she was getting her Medal of Valor, since both their fathers died in the same mining accident. And this is how Katniss gets her iconic nickname, Catnip, since when she told Gale her name, he misheard her. And from there, they begin to begrudgingly become friends, trading knowledge and helping each other out on hunting trips. Gale teaches her how to fish and how to set up snares better. Katniss teaches him which plants are edible and eventually gives him one of her father's bows. And the next few paragraphs that start on the bottom of page 111, I think perfectly describe their relationship. Gale gave me a sense of security I'd lacked since my father's death. His companionship replaced the long solitary hours in the woods. I became a much better hunter when I didn't have to look over my shoulder constantly, when someone was watching my back. But he turned into so much more than a hunting partner. He became my confidant, someone with whom I could share thoughts I could never voice inside the fence. In exchange, he trusted me with his. Being out in the woods with Gale, sometimes I was actually happy. I call him my friend, but in the last year it seemed too casual a word for what Gale is to me. A pang of longing shoots through my chest. If only he was with me now. But of course I don't want that. I don't want him in the arena where he'd be dead in a few days. I just miss him, and I hate being so alone. Does he miss me? He must. Okay, guys, this is probably the nicest I'll be toward Gale for the rest of the series. So, if there's anyone on Team Gale listening, enjoy the moment. But I do really love reading about Katniss and Gale's friendship before it got ruined when Gale started developing romantic feelings. He's a good friend, good big brother, and it's really sad he turned shitty later on. Katniss also starts comparing her relationship with Gale to Peeta, which really isn't fair since Katniss and Peeta at this point barely know each other, and where they're going, their survival means the other's death. And the foundation of Katniss and Gale's relationship is helping each other survive. Kind of ironic how it all ends, because, spoiler alert, Katniss ends up with Peeta. Again, this is a reread podcast. I'm liable to spoil things. Because by the end of the series, Gale hurts Katniss to the point where they can never have the kind of friendship they used to have, and she can't fully trust him. And Katniss starts out not trusting Peeta, but by the end, she not only completely trusts him, but he helps her go on living because he represents hope, whereas Gale represents fire and destruction. But we're not going to get too deep into that right now. So Effie's now knocking on Katniss's door, reminding her it's going to be another big day. Seriously, how much caffeine does Effie drink? She's probably a regular at whatever the capital equivalent to Starbucks is. So this day is dedicated to getting them ready for the interview the next night. Katniss goes down to breakfast, and the chapter ends with us learning there's been a slight change of plans. Those plans being that Peeta has now requested to be coached separately. Dun dun dun! And, well, what's he up to? Why does he want to be coached separately? We don't know yet, but it's time for another break. When we come back, we'll talk about Chapter 9, and we'll wrap up part 1. Hey guys, we're back with another random recommendation. So, this one isn't a book I've read. I've only read like a few pages, but it's not really like a novel. It's just something I think book lovers would appreciate. It's called Weird Things Customers Say in Bookstores by Jen Campbell. So I'll just read the back of the book for you guys. A simple Twitter question posed by John Clays. What is your biggest pet peeve? Inspired Jen Campbell to start a blog collecting all the ridiculous conversations overheard in her bookstore. Filled with fun and quirky illustrations by the award-winning brothers McLeod, and featuring contributions from booksellers across the United States and Canada, as well as the author's native UK, Weird Things Customers Say in Bookstores is a celebration of bookstores, large and small, and of all the brilliant booksellers who toil in those literary fields, as well as the myriad of colorful characters that walk through the doors every day. So yeah, it is exactly what it sounds like, just a collection of fun conversations of things customers say in bookstores that are entertaining, like this one on the first page is just great. Customer, where are your copies of Breaking Dawn? I can't see any on the shelf. Bookseller, sorry, I think we've sold out of the Twilight books. We're waiting on more. Customer, what? Bookseller, we should have some more in the morning. Customer, but I need a copy now. I just finished the third one last night. Bookseller, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. Customer, no, you don't understand. I've taken the whole day off work to read it. Bookseller, customer, I need to know what happens now. Bookseller, I mean, you're relatable, wanting a whole day off to read a new book. So yeah, Weird Things Customers Say in Bookstores by Jen Campbell. If you want something to make you laugh, this'll probably do it. Back to the episode. And we're back. This chapter opens with Katniss feeling betrayed. After all, with all the times he's helped her, part of her can't help but want to trust Peeta. But she's also relieved because she no longer has to pretend to be friends. So the plan for the day is that they each get 4 hours with Effie and Haymitch separately to prep for the interviews. Katniss gets the first 4 hours with Effie, using that whole time to teach Katniss how to walk in high heels, a dress, and how to sit and smile properly. And I feel for Katniss in this moment. I am in my 20s and I still struggle so hard to walk in heels. And to anyone who can and can even run in them, I'm convinced you guys have superpowers. But I also used to be a dancer from like kindergarten to early high school. Now, I wasn't a great dancer. I was like average at best, but I still did ballet. Like I had enough skill to do pointe, dancing on my freaking tiptoes. Yet now I occasionally have to like hold on to the handles on the treadmill so I don't fall over, and I trip walking across flat surfaces. It doesn't make sense, but I promise it's possible. So anyway, they end the lesson with Effie saying like, well, that's the best I can do. Just remember, Katniss, you want the audience to like you. And then Katniss, this is on page 115, by the way. Katniss then goes on to say, and you don't think they will, I ask? Not if you keep glaring at them the entire time. Why don't you save that for the arena? Instead, think of yourself among friends, says Effie. They're betting on how long I'll live, I burst out. They're not my friends. We'll try and pretend, snaps Effie. Then she composes herself and beams at me. See? Like this. I'm smiling at you even though you're aggravating me. Yes, it feels very convincing, I say. I'm going to eat. Oh, man. So, after that, Katniss goes to eat lunch and hopes that her afternoon session with Haymitch is better. She is wrong. And this is another moment from the books that I understand why it was cut from the movie, but oh my god, do I wish this was in the movie. Because this whole moment is hilarious and Jennifer and Woody would have crushed it. So this whole scene is just Haymitch struggling to figure out how to present Katniss to the audience. So far she's standout tribute because she volunteered for her sister, had the best costume in the parade, she has the top training score, but no one knows who she is, so he's trying to figure out like what her angle for the interview should be to sell to the audience. And Katniss knows he's right because, if the audience feels like they know her, then they're more likely to sponsor her. And I'm going to read the dialogue here on page 116 for no reason other than it's funny and I want to. What's Peeta's approach, or am I not allowed to ask, I say. Likeable. He has a sort of self-deprecating humor, and naturally, says Haymitch, whereas when you open your mouth, you come across as more sullen and hostile. I do not, I say. Please, I don't know where you pulled that cheery, wavy girl on the chariot from, but I haven't seen her before or since, says Haymitch. And you've given me so many reasons to be cheery, I counter. But you don't have to please me. I'm not going to sponsor you, so pretend I'm the audience, Haymitch says. Delight me. Fine, I snarl. So Haymitch continues to ask her questions like he's interviewing her, and it's not going well since Katniss can't help but think about how unjust everything is since she literally has to please people to have a chance of survival. I'd be pissed too. And on page 117, I'll read it for you guys. But it's not going well for both Katniss or Haymitch. All right, enough, he says. We've got to find another angle. Not only are you hostile, I don't know anything about you. I've asked you 50 questions and still have no sense of your life, your family, what you care about. They want to know about you, Katniss. But I don't want them to. They're already taking my future. They can't have the things that mattered to me in the past, I say. Then lie! Make something up, says Haymitch. I'm not good at lying, I said. Well, you better learn fast. You've got about as much charm as a dead slug. So, ouch, with the common Haymitch, and even he knows how much it hurts. So, by the end of the session, she is no one, and Haymitch gives up. He just ends it by telling her to answer the questions and not to glare at the audience and let them know how much she hates them. And Katniss, being understandably frustrated, goes to eat alone in her room, orders enough food to eat herself sick, and takes out her anger by smashing dishes around the room. Then Lavinia walks in. Katniss screams at her and is throwing a slight tantrum. Okay, and now what follows is actually a really nice moment, so I'm gonna read it for you guys. It starts on page 118. I hate her too, with her knowing reproachful eyes that call me a coward, a monster, a puppet of the capital, both now and then. For her, justice must finally be happening. At least my death will help pay for the life of the boy in the woods. But instead of fleeing the room, the girl closes the door behind her and goes to the bathroom. She comes back with a damp cloth and wipes my face gently, then cleans the blood from a broken plate off my hands. Why is she doing this? Why am I letting her? I should have tried to save you, I whisper. She shakes her head. Does this mean we were right to stand by? That she has forgiven me? No, it was wrong, I say. She taps her lips with her fingers, then points to my chest. I think she means that I would have just ended up in Avox too. Probably would have. In Avox or dead. So Katniss then helps Lavinia clean up the room, and Katniss lets her tuck her in, and this moment ends with Katniss saying, "Then she goes. I want her to stay until I fall asleep, to be there when I wake up. I want the protection of this girl, even though she never had mine." Then right after that, cuts to Katniss waking up, and when she wakes up in the morning, her prep team is literally standing over her, which sounds horrifying. Like, I know the prep team is obviously harmless, but I don't even like any of my friends or family to do that to me first thing in the morning. The only one allowed to do that is Ray, my dog. And even then, I'm a bit cranky. Anyway, so Katniss's lessons with Haymitch and Effie are done. This day belongs to Cinna and the prep team. Katniss hopes that Cinna will make her look so good that no one will care about whatever she has to say. So the prep team works on Katniss until late afternoon. When they're done, her skin is glowing, and they painted flame designs on her nails. They braid her hair, and her skin is shimmering in gold dust. Then Cinna has her close her eyes while they put the dress on her. And I can't not read the description of the dress out loud to you guys, so here we go. It's at the bottom of page 120, and Katniss opens her eyes. The creature standing before me in the full-length mirror has come from another world, where skin shimmers and eyes flash, and apparently they make their clothes from jewels, because my dress, oh my dress, is entirely covered in reflective precious gems, red and yellow and white with bits of blue that accent the tips of the flame designs. The slightest movement gives the impression I am engulfed in tongues of fire. I am not pretty, I am not beautiful, I am as radiant as the sun. So this is one of my favorite dresses in the whole series. It's probably a very basic answer, but there's a reason for that, and that reason being that this dress is fucking amazing. And I know I'm not the only one who was a bit disappointed with the dress in the movie. Not to say that the Girl on Fire dress in the movie is bad, it's still a really pretty dress. Jennifer Lawrence looks amazing in it. Then again, Jennifer Lawrence looks good in everything. But the dress in the movie doesn't really match the description of what's in the book. But anyway, enough about rambling about fictional dresses. Time for Cinna to actually be helpful when it comes to prepping Katniss for the interview, and manages to make her feel better. So Katniss is naturally very nervous, especially after the dead slug comment from Haymitch, and that she's hostile. Cinna tells her that she should just be herself, that she's mostly hostile around Haymitch, but Cinna assures Katniss that most of the people do actually like her. The prep team loves her. She's won over the Capitol. And Cinna suggests that when Katniss is answering the questions, she should imagine that she's talking to a friend. But Katniss says she can't do that because her best friend is Gale, who already knows everything about her, so it wouldn't make sense since he already knows her. So Cinna asks if Katniss could consider him a friend, and the answer is yes. Any one of us would be lucky to have Cinna as a friend. So Cinna tells her that he'll be sitting on the main platform during the interviews, so when she's answering the questions, that she should find him and just direct her attention to him and answer as honestly as possible. And now, time for the interviews. So, the interview takes place on stage, constructed in front of the training center, and I always forget that because unlike in the movies, the tributes don't wait backstage for their turn. They sit on the stage the whole time. Anyway, so Katniss and Cinna leave her room. They go to meet up with the rest of the District 12 team. Peeta is wearing a black suit with flame accents. Katniss is relieved that they're not dressed identically, though I'd argue that Josh would look good in the Girl on Fire dress. So the tributes are all lined up and take their places on stage where they just sit in a big arc the whole time. Katniss will go second to last since they go in order by district, and the girl goes first, and Katniss just wishes she could go first and get it over with. And she's also worried that, like with the game makers, the audience will grow tired and bored after watching 22 other people interview. And she can't get away with shooting an arrow again. Also, Haymitch reminds Pete and Katniss to act like a happy pair, which naturally annoys Katniss. But at least once they're on stage, there isn't much of a chance for socializing. And now we're introduced to Caesar Flickerman, played by the brilliant Stanley Tucci in the movie, of course. If you've read Ballad, you know that Caesar shares the same surname as Lucky Flickerman, who was, the host/interviewer for the 10th Hunger Games. And I still maintain my stance that I made in whichever Ballad episode when I talked about it. But I maintain my stance that the two Hunger Games hosts are related, and I'm okay with that. And I understand if it feels too, fan servicey for you, but it doesn't bother me because nepotism runs rampant in the entertainment industry, for better or worse. And I'm also kind of hoping that they can just cast Stanley Tucci to play Lucky, because why not? He's one of the standout performances in the movie, so why not just have him sort of reprise his role? Anyway, let's talk about Book Caesar now. According to Katniss, he's been hosting the interviews for more than 40 years. Another reason for me to believe that Caesar is Lucky's son or nephew or something. And Katniss is also a little freaked out by Caesar because he looks pretty unchanged throughout the years. Even wears the same suit for each interview, just dyes his hair different colors. Though they do surgeries in the Capitol to make people appear younger and thinner. And this next passage on page 124 just basically directly calls out the insane and ridiculous beauty standards that we have here in the U.S. and in most first world countries, I think. In District 12, looking old is something of an achievement since so many people die early. You see an elderly person and you want to congratulate them on their longevity. Ask the secrets of survival. A plump person is envied because they aren't scraping by like the majority of us, but here it is different. Wrinkles aren't desirable. A round belly isn't a sign of success. I could go on so many rants about how much damage the beauty and cosmetic industry and Hollywood has done to our mental health, especially to young women. But we don't have time for that. It's a big and complicated problem that can't fit in a quick side tangent in a podcast talking about the Hunger Games. But basically, the Eurocentric, unrealistic beauty standards is bullshit. The reason so many of these beauty companies stay in business is because they make sure you feel shitty about yourself and manipulate you into thinking they have the answer to make you feel better. They don't. It's just a toxic cycle they trap you in. And I know I can't instantly make you feel better or solve your insecurities by saying you're already beautiful and perfect just the way you are, because it is so much more complicated than that. And this toxic beauty industry has unfortunately led many people to very dark places. But I just hope that everyone out there can eventually feel at peace with themselves, because your life matters and you deserve happiness. Anyway, moving on before this becomes a different podcast entirely. Caesar's hair is blue this year, so that's cool. And his lips and eyelids are also coated in the same color. Katniss says he looks less scary than the previous year when they were dyed crimson red, so he looked like he was bleeding, so that's something. Anyway, Caesar tells a few jokes to warm up the audience, and it's time for interviews. So, the girl from 1, who we know is Glimmer, but I don't think Katniss learns her name in this book. She's up first. Anyway, it's pretty obvious what kind of angle her mentor had her go for. Katniss just describes her as sexy all the way. And it's also worth noting that Glimmer is wearing a see-through gold gown and looks provocative. And given the fact that Glimmer is a 17-year-old girl, this is disturbing on so many levels. I am glad they changed the dress for the movie. And given what we learned from Finnick and Mockingjay about what happens to victors who are deemed desirable, in a very messed up way, Glimmer was spared, quote unquote. Like, don't get me wrong, it still sucks that she died and the people who, like, knew and loved her have to live with that pain, but her life definitely would have been a new kind of hell had she won. Anyway, moving on from that really disturbing line of thoughts. So, each interview lasts 3 minutes. Katniss compliments Caesar by saying he does his best to help out each tribute in order to help them out on stage. Can even turn a weak response into something memorable just based on the way he reacts to things. The interviews go by, each tribute playing up an angle, Cato being a ruthless killing machine, Foxface being sly and elusive, the boy from 10 is pretty shy and quiet, and Rue is essentially dressed like a fairy. Caesar's sweet with her, compliments her on her score, and Rue says her iconic line, "I'm very hard to catch. If they can't catch me, they can't kill me." And I mean, she's right, but we're not going there yet. And also, if you guys get the chance, you should check out the deleted scenes for this movie. In one of them, they show clips of like a more extended versions of some of the tributes interviews, which I think is really cool. Plus, the actors got to do a bit of improv in character with Stanley Tucci, which is really cool for them and probably something they'll never forget. And I understand why they wouldn't show the full interviews of every tribute in the movie. That would take up too much time. But I do wish they had kept in Rue's full interview because it makes the whole situation even more horrible and what happens later even more tragic. And I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube, so I'll find, if I find it, I'll link it in the show notes for you guys. Anyway, so Rue's interview ends and her district partner, Thresh, his turn. Katniss guesses that Thresh is like 6.5 feet tall, built like an ox. We also learned that the careers had invited Thresh to join them, something that they very rarely do, but in the end he had turned them down. And all throughout training, he has pretty much kept to himself and shown very little interest in training, though he still scores a 10. He pretty much ignores Caesar's questions and doesn't engage in his banter, but he's large and intimidating enough to get away with it, and Katniss wishes she could pull that off. And before we know it, it's Katniss's turn. Just like in the movie, she's so nervous and overwhelmed by the crowd and being on stage that she misses Caesar's first question. But then she finds Cinna in the crowd, and when Caesar repeats the question, she imagines that Cinna had been the one to ask it. So Caesar asks, like, what's impressed her most since she arrived, and Katniss answers honestly by saying, the lamb stew. This gets a laugh from the audience, especially when Caesar manages to get a joke out of it. Then we get this beautiful couplet of dialogue when Caesar asks Katniss about her costume during the tribute parade. "Now, Katniss," he says confidently, "when you came out in the opening ceremonies, my heart actually stopped. What did you think of that costume?" Cinna raised one eyebrow at me. "Be honest." "You mean after I got over my fear of being burnt alive?" I asked. Yeah, everyone laughs at that. Katniss then goes on to say that she thought the costume was the most gorgeous thing she'd ever seen and couldn't believe she was wearing it, nor can she believe that she's wearing the dress she's currently wearing on stage. The audience oohs and ahs at her dress. Then Cinna makes the motion that Katniss recognizes as twirl for me. Katniss does, and the reaction is immediate. So, like, when she twirls, like, the way all the gems, like, reflect off her, it looks like she's engulfed in flames, and everyone loves it. And Katniss ends up giggling for possibly the first time in her life. Caesar makes a joke about not having her fall off the stage and, following in her mentor's footsteps, and because everyone likes making a joke out of Haymitch. They then briefly talk about her training score. Caesar asks for a hint as to what she did to earn it, but she's not allowed to. Then Caesar brings up Prim and the moment Katniss volunteered for her. She shuts down a bit, and the whole audience has gone quiet as they hang on her every word as they wait for her answer. So, there's about a page and a half left of this chapter, so I'm just going to read to the end because something very significant happens. Be honest, be honest. I swallow hard. She asked me to try really hard to win. The audience is frozen, hanging on my every word. And what did you say? Prompts Caesar gently. But instead of warmth, I feel an icy rigidity take over my body. My muscles tense as they do before a kill. When I speak, my voice seems to have dropped an octave. I swore I would. I bet you did, says Caesar, giving me a squeeze. Then the buzzer goes off. Sorry, we're out of time. Best of luck, Katniss Everdeen. Tribute from District 12. The applause continues long after I'm seated. I look to Cinna for reassurance. He gives me a subtle thumbs up. I'm still in a daze for the first part of Peeta's interview. He has the audience from the get-go, though. I can hear them laughing, shouting out. He plays up the baker's son thing, comparing the tributes to the breads from their district. Then he has a funny anecdote about the perils of the capital showers. Tell me, do I smell like roses? He asks Caesar, and then there's a whole run where they take turns sniffing each other that brings down the house. I'm coming back into focus when Caesar asks him if he has a girlfriend back home. Peeta hesitates, then gives an unconvincing shake of his head. Handsome lad like you, there must be some special girl. Come on, what's her name? Says Caesar. Peeta sighs. Well, there is this one girl I've had a crush on ever since I can remember, but I'm pretty sure she didn't know I was alive until the reaping. Sounds of sympathy from the crowd. Unrequited love they can relate to. She have another fellow? Asked Caesar. I don't know, but a lot of boys like her, says Peeta. So here's what you do. You win. You go home. She can't turn you down then, eh? Says Caesar encouragingly. I don't think it's going to work out. Winning won't help in my case, says Peeta. Well, why ever not? Says Caesar, mystified. Peeta blushes, beet red, and stammers out, because she came here with me. I don't know what that noise was that just came out of me, but just like that, Peeta has stolen the show. My jaw dropped the first time I read this book, because up until this point, we've all had this perception of Peeta fed to us through Katniss's eyes. Like, we're convinced now he probably shouldn't be trusted, and that's not smart to care about him, but we don't really know him. But then he does this, and we're forced to reassess what we think about Peeta, and at the same time, like, wonder what he's doing. And it's such a brilliant cliffhanger and such an amazing way to end part one, because I remember flipping to the page so fast to start part two the first time I read this book. So, exciting things are happening. So, with all that being said, we have come to the end of the episode. Next time we will be talking about chapters 10 to 12. Guys, we will be in the arena next week. Remember when we read Ballad and it felt like it took so long to get to the arena? Well, here we are already. It feels like time is flying and yet so much has happened. So, thank you guys so much for listening. Follow, subscribe, you know the drill. Follow on Instagram at bookishbabbles_podcast. If you have any friends who are Hunger Games fans, please let them know about this podcast. I'd love to have them join. It's getting late. I'm losing my train of thought. Yeah, I think I've covered everything. So, with all that being said, I hope you guys have a great day/night, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!